The death row is a place where the most dangerous criminals are supposed to stop forever. The people who made such crimes, the state, knows that their crimes are too serious and their lives have to end. And when the execution itself becomes a horror story, what then? What happens when the resulting final punishment becomes something much darker than it was supposed to be? In the present list, we have revealed 7 of the most gruesome and botched executions on death row in the modern history that ignited outrage across the country or raised moral and ethical questions and was condemned by international community. They are not merely the tales of a criminal, rather cautionary tales of the things that occasionally fail even in their ultimate performance. 1. Clayton Lockett, The 43 Minutes of Agony, 2014. In April 2014, the state of Oklahoma intended to execute Clayton Lockett, who was convicted of shooting a young woman and burying her alive. His acts were certainly monstrous. What happened at the time of his sentencing to death shocked the world. When the lethal injection started, something went terribly awry. The IV was improperly piped, and the drugs leaked right to his tissue rather than entering his bloodstream. Lockett started having convulsions. He is struggling to get on his knees. He spoke. He moaned. It did not take me a couple of minutes. He had to suffer 43 minutes of pain that could be seen publicly before succumbing to the heart attack. It frightened eyewitnesses. According to one reporter, it felt like the human experiment turned out monstrously wrong. The incident induced a stop on executions in Oklahoma and initiated investigations of lethal injections in the country in general. But to many, the scenario of Clayton Lockett gripping and panting on the gurney could not be forgotten. 2. Angel Neves Diaz, The Slow Burn, 2006. December 13, 2006, on the death of Angel Neves Diaz, the execution chamber of Florida was transformed into a horrific place. He was found guilty of killing a nightclub manager, but it was not his guilt or innocence that made news. It was what occurred in the death chamber. The execution group had missed Diaz's vein. The drugs found their way to his soft tissue instead of his bloodstream. 7 minutes should have turned into 34 minutes of patheticness. Diaz grimaced. He ground his teeth. According to the witnesses, his body became gray. And what was worse of it, he appeared to be aware of what was going on all the time. A booster was necessary. His arms were internally burned due to chemicals by the time he was declared dead. National debate on lethal injection flared up again because of the incident. Experts termed it as chemical torture, and even some death penalty proponents started to query, are we the monsters we are going after? 3. Joseph Wood, The 2-Hour Execution, 2014. Arizona was on the second annual plan to execute Joseph Wood at the time, and the 2-drug blend being used was controversial and had not undergone full test. Wood was serving a sentence of murdering his former girlfriend and her father. The techniques was meant to be executed within minutes. It took 1 hour, 57 minutes. People were aghast as Wood gasped more than 600 times, according to the witnesses. He could not breathe. His chest was heaving. The mouth was opening and closing. An official even demanded that the execution can be halted halfway through it, which is practically unheard of. The medications did not work to sedate and paralyze correctly. The scene was more of torture as opposed to a clinical procedure. Thereafter, according to the lawyers of Wood, he was gasping and fighting to breathe almost 2 hours. It was an excruciating experience I had ever seen. Publicity, coming one step in advance of execution, saw Arizona shelve all executions after the incident, but the public had already been lost. 4. John Evans, The Electric Chair Fire, 1983. Electric chairs have been the instrument of choice at a time when lethal injections were non-existent, and in the case of John Evans, it proved to be the icon of all that can go bad. This was the murder of a police officer, and he was convicted in the case of armed robbery. April 22, 1983, was the day when he was put into the electric chair in Alabama. The initial flow of their electricity was going to be 1,900 volts, which should have killed him on the spot. It did not do so, however. Instead, smoke started emerging on his head. Sparks flew. His body was trembling. Evans had not been killed. A second shock was demanded. And third. 3 shocks during 14 minutes later, and he was pronounced dead. People reported how they could smell the burning flesh and how Evans would groan in between jerks. As one of them later told the press, "As close to medieval torture as I ever want to see in modern America." The case aided in the move of the states to drop the electric chairs completely. 5. Pedro Medina, Flames from the Mask, 1997. Electric chair. The electric chair of Florida was known as Old Sparky, and in 1997, that title took another horrific meaning. Pedro Medina, a Cuban immigrant on death row following a conviction of murder, was to be executed on March 25. He was sitting on the chair. It was the throw of the switch. Then, what? Fire. People who saw him could scream as flames came out of the metal mask over his face. Smoke belched into the room. It was a room of the smell. Blame was put on the faulty wiring by Florida officials, but the blame was placed by civil rights groups to the entire system. The show resulted in an immediate halt on executions in the state through use of the electric chair. The death of Medina was turning point not due to the crime that he committed, but because mode of justice that was used by the state appeared to be same as torture. 6. William Kemler, the first execution by electricity, 1890. William Kemler became the first person who was executed by electric chair ever, and his death is known in history not as a special historical landmark, but as a catastrophe. It was the year 1890. Kemler was guilty of killing his common-law wife using a hatchet. His execution was intended to demonstrate electricity as becoming a more humane new version of hanging. However, the thing that happened was a nightmare. Kemler was stunned by the first shock, not killed. His pulse had been examined by the doctors, still alive. They stimulated him a second time, and this time, his body caught fire. The witnesses mentioned the smell of burnt meat. More than 8 minutes passed when he was pronounced dead, said one reporter. It was like a man being roasted alive. All that the execution did was to underline the horror of the electric chair and not its humanity. And then, the argument over morality and dignity of the capital punishment would rest on the last moments of Kemler decades after. 7. Alan Lee Davis, The Blood-Soaked Final Photo, 1999. Alan Lee Davis was the last person to die on the electric chair in Florida, and his execution produced a nation-shocking photo. Davis has killed a pregnant woman and her 2 daughters. His connection to Old Sparky happened on July 8, 1999. Something awfully wrong happened as the electricity was flowing around his body. Blood came from his mouth and nose. He became hideously red to the face. After the event, authorities said that things were run as per the protocol. Until then, the execution photo had leaked out, that is Davis on the chair, head hanging in his white shirt and blood all about the chest region. The photo enraged the whole nation. Not out of pity, people supported Davis, but because the golden opportunity of a visual could not be avoided. It was a barbaric sight. That picture sealed the coffin of Florida electric chair. Almost immediately, however, the state changed to lethal injection. Though not, as it turned out, before the world had witnessed in gory detail what the death of state-sanctioned death might actually be like. When justice looks like horror. All those executions were supposed to be of the final character, the kind of putting an end to evil in a professional, sterile way. They questioned, however, instead not guilt, but as to methods, ethics, and faults. How can you rely on a justice system when it does not even kill in a humane manner? When the ultimate punishment becomes pure torture, fire, blood, or panic, is it still justice? Or has it changed to what it is not? These are not account of pity of those condemned, they are cautious reminders that through the act of punishment, we in no way need to forget about our humanity. Since, after that, we are in danger of becoming what we say we are trying to destroy. We often think of death row as the end of a dark journey, where justice finally catches up with those who did the unthinkable. But as you've just seen, sometimes the final chapter isn't about justice. It's about pain, silence, and failure. These weren't just executions, they were spectacles. Some left bodies burned, others left witnesses traumatized. And a few raised a haunting question. If we carry out justice like this, what does that make us? No matter how horrific the crime, the method of execution reflects the society that performs it. And when death becomes chaos, cruelty, or a slow, tortured process, it says more about us than it does about the condemned. These 7 stories weren't just about guilt or punishment, they were warnings that systems built on precision can still go terribly, terrifyingly wrong. And when that happens, it's not just one life lost, it's a piece of our collective humanity. Thank you for watching, and remember, justice without dignity isn't justice at all.